Well, there we go. That's the question that shall not be named. Yeah, that's something that when I die, like my gravestone it will say like, you know, why? Yeah, but why is there no network multiplayer? Like, you know, it's a lot of people have asked that, and I've since learned that a lot of people ask that of every single game that doesn't have it. The reason why we wouldn't do it today is because, or you know, if I could teleport back in time with team back then or whatever, we didn't have the resources to do it. Like, we were not skilled enough. We had never done anything like that. We tried, turns out really freaking hard. And now people are gonna say, oh, it's not that hard. That's the funny thing, because it's side-scrolling shooter. You have so many bullets on the screen, so many enemies. We wanted to have homing bullets, for example. Now, if they're homing, you know, and you have 4 players in the game, who decides where the bullet is going, you know? Yeah, and these are all solvable things, but it really like starts spiraling into a lot of work and a lot of bug fix and a lot of testing. So it was not even necessarily guaranteed we could have done it, and it was definitely sure that it would have pushed the launch back, which we were sure we couldn't do. We needed to get this game out. And even if we had infinite time, we weren't sure if we could have done it. And then when we were like maybe more confident in our abilities, we were so far along on the development that we would have just, because to make a good network multiplayer game, you had to know that you want to do that from the get-go. You can't just randomly, oh, I'm gonna splotch, you know, I'm gonna throw a network multiplayer, you know, like just, you know, hashtag include multiplayer, you know, and that's it. Like that's not how it works. And then there's the like secondary cost. That's really simple, but often easy to miss, is that if we had 2 programmers most of the project, if we made network multiplayer, at least one of those people, instead of doing what they did, they would have been doing network multiplayer, which means that all the little things that all of us did would not be in the game, and instead you would have network multiplayer. Like, it just would be a different game with less of what made it good. And so we kind of made this active decision, and I would still to this day defend the decision that this is a single player / local co-op game, and we want it to be as good as possible as that. To add network multiplayer would compromise that. It's kind of like, hey, you know, we are making a basketball game, but you know, let's also add football in there, you know, because some people really like football. And it's like, yeah, but you know, then can we make, you know, the ball has to bounce differently, you know, whatever, let's make a compromise, you know, I'm sure nobody will mind. You know, it's kind of like that. Like, you end up having to compromise to include more things, and we want to do a very specific thing. And the more like historical reason, like what I remember saying several times, and like I like saying sort of this, especially when I get passionate about things, I say these inflammatory things. I remember saying that, yeah, you know, there's, you know, people, I didn't say people, I said things that are not printable, but I mean, some of the people was nice, but some of the people were demanding or whatever, it made me slightly upset. So I said that, you know, yeah, they say that, but then who's actually gonna sit down on TeamSpeak or Skype or whatever with their friends, you know, that they already have, and be like, hey, let's play Stardust Galaxy Warriors over network. You're already, when you're there, you already know what you're gonna be playing. You know, it's gonna be, you know, it's gonna be League of Legends, it's gonna be Dota, it's gonna be Counter Global Offensive, it's gonna be Team Fortress 2, Overwatch, whatever. You already know what you're gonna be playing. It's actually quite a niche group of people. Like, and, yeah, it's a thing that would be nice to have. Like, a lot of people like, I would buy this if it had network multiplayer. No, you wouldn't. Maybe when it was a super low sale, but like, no, you wouldn't, because you already know what you're gonna be playing with your friends. You are not our target audience, and that kind of sucks. Like, it, because there's legit people who are like, oh, I wish I could play this with my, you know, I live in a different country from where I'm from. You know, my friends are in my original country. Like, even, you know, Steve, our marketing dude, he, you know, he's an American and he's living in Finland. And he's like, he would like to play with his buddies, you know, back in America. And he can't do that, because we don't have network multiplayer. I can't even say the word, it's so ruined for me. But like, you know, there are people who could have used it, but it's simply just because of the things I mentioned earlier, it just wouldn't have been, you know, worth it. It would have made everything else in the, like, it would have gotten to a point where if we had done it, the people who would be asking for it probably wouldn't even know of the game, because it would have been worse game. So it wouldn't have been as well received. Like, it's just, it's a really weird question. It's a really nasty question, because it comes down to, you know, because, you know, I was basically, you know, I did a lot of programming. It comes down to me just saying, well, I wasn't good enough. Like, in a way, sometimes it feels like that's what people want me to say. They want me to be like, hey, well, wasn't good enough. And I mean, that's true. And I have no problem admitting it, because there's probably people out there who still got enjoyment out of Stardust Galaxy Warriors. So yeah, I wasn't good enough to do network multiplayer. And I would argue maybe that for a game like this, to make it exactly as SGW is, there might not be a person who would be good enough. Like, something would have to change. It would be a different game. Now, whether that different game would be better or worse, I don't know. But you know, we did what we did, and this is where we are. But as you can maybe tell, like, this is something I've thought about a lot. And this is what it really boils down to, is, you know, this is what we wanted to make. I would say yes. Of course, not massive financial success, especially with our current team size. I'm not gonna lie, but yes, like, for me personally at least, it was a massive success. Even putting it out there was a success. The positive reception it received was a success. And especially what was success was because it's even though it doesn't look that way in the surface, it's a very abstract game in some ways. And for example, communicating with some people on Reddit, stuff like that, reading some reviews, to realize that the abstract things I wanted to communicate with the game actually were communicated makes me so happy. Like, there's, for example, I remember there was a Reddit time and people asked like what games were your inspiration, or somebody asked that, and I answered that, and that's my answer to this day, is that you know, there's no specific game. It's like, I remember playing these, you know, arcade shooters with spaceships or flying animals or whatever, like you know, random like arcades, or you know, I was traveling with my parents on a holiday, and there would be like an arcade cabinet at the hotel lobby or whatever. No way of remembering what those games specifically were. Just remember the feeling of, like, you know, flying to the right and shooting at things, and then sometimes when I shoot things, a thing comes out and I pick it up, and now I'm shooting missiles. And I wanted to channel that like childlike happiness of just like, oh no, this happened, and now I just get to blow up more stuff. And I said that, and then the person was like, well, you definitely nailed it, or something on those lines. And I was just like mentally high-fiving me so hard I probably got an aneurysm, because I was like, that was, you know, that's what I want to do. And same thing with the writing of it, like, because after the music, I think another thing is that's gotten a lot of positive feedback is the writing. It's also gotten a lot of negative feedback, but I wanted to write it, as I said previously, I wanted to do like Borderlands without the edge was one thing I was saying. That's a very like simplified version, a very like, how would I say, like clickbaity way of putting it, but that was one thing I was thinking at the time. And you know, and I wanted it to be silly but still take itself seriously. I wanted every character to have a personality but not too much stuff like that, and people seem to have picked up on that too. And also the parts when I, you know, the way I wrote the story, it's worth mentioning is one day I was at home working from home. I was like, this is gonna be the day, now I'll write all the dialogue. And I made 2 pounds of coffee and I drank all of it, and it was like, you know, my hands were shaking pretty much so much that I didn't need to. When I was writing, I just moved my hands sideways and they were just automatically clicking the keys. And I wrote it basically in one go. Pretty much. And I was like, okay, so this church is like this, these churches are like this. And I had this little like Excel sheet where I would look like, hey, you know, it looks like, you know, Black Bear has been, you know, not having a lot of lines, so I'll give Black Bear some screen time. It was kind of like I established how all of the pilots would act. And then I would be, okay, somebody has to start the conversation. I guess it should be this guy, and then this girl is gonna say something because she hasn't gotten lines. And then they would, you know, respond according to their personality. And there were specific points where, you know, I was writing at them and I was like chuckling to myself. Like, I mean, I was caffeinated, like I would probably have been chuckling, like watching, you know, paint dry and still be cackling. But regardless, there were specific points where I was, you know, laughing a little bit more than generally. And those tend to be the points when I, you know, when I see people play this and they laugh too, and when people get those jokes, that's and especially when I did some parts where for example, there's a specific part where there's the merchant that comes after every stage, and it's kind of like a running gag that it basically forces the players to shop every time. Like they have no option. And then there's some point where it's like he has a sale going on, and then I was like, okay, I'm gonna do a little bit like it's not really a risky joke, But there are people who think it's a risky joke to have female jokers going like, as a female, I adore sales, which is obviously sarcastic. And then Red Tiger says that, and then Blackberry is like, yay, capitalism and stereotypes. And I was like, you know, based on what you read online, like some people might, like, it feels people might like lynch me for that, like, oh, you're such a, but then I've been seeing like, you know, and I've seen people play the game, you know, and then girls tend to laugh at that part, and I'm like, you know, in a way, me, like, look at me, and I reach out to the female audience, so to speak, and I wrote a joke that they laughed at. And like, it's such a weird thing that feels so significant, but it does. And there are other similar things there too, where I like wrote a joke for like a specific group of people, and then like most people don't get angry about them. Maybe some people miss them, but then they tend to roughly hit the mark. And it was really nice, and to see that like nobody got, and I mean, it's super non-offensive, I guess, but it's still not non-offensive to a point of being just inane or whatever, like the game, you know, it's E for everyone, but it's not just like, you know, unicorns farting rainbows or whatever. Like, it's you know, Saturday morning cartoon, and it really, I feel, succeeded in that. And that's, I guess, one takeaway is that you can do like a silly game in a way that is, because people are often like, oh, it's, you know, it's mean shit, and like I hate these characters, and I wish I could silence them and stuff like that, which we're lucky we don't have voice acting, because that would probably have been a thing. But yeah, like, it's still possible to do that and do it in a way where it enhances the experience, rather than be like, I wish I could turn this off. There were a lot of people who said that too. There were a lot of people who were like, I hate the dialogue, it's trying to be so funny and stuff like that. And that's another thing, like, it's never really, even though I just said myself, I write these little jokes in there, but they are jokes that you could make in a conversation, you know. They are things like, a lot of it is written like, it's stuff I would say, you know, to another person. It's not trying to be anything more than that. It's not trying to be like there's a massive setup and a punchline and everybody's clapping and cheering. It's just things that makes you smile a little bit because, hey, you know, this dude who's a little bit silly said a silly thing that fits their character, but also a little bit subverts expectations, and oh, it's breaking the fourth wall a little bit, or like it's not, you know, it's just fun. Like, it goes back to the whole, like, everything needs to be fun. So I guess that's one takeaway, that you can do a story without like jerking off over it, like, oh, this is a story-driven, you know, game, but also without it just being like a feeling tacked on. And then outside of that, I feel that really big takeaways that there is some potential in this genre, in this, like, in doing like a side-scroller stuff like that. Like, there is something magical to them that is not often tapped, because they're so often, what they try to do now is turn them into spectacles where like the perspective changes, and you know, it's to be hunter back and everything. Like, just keep the simple basic core gameplay and just make that as fun. And that's really has become my core thesis as a designer, is when you're making a game, like, make it boring first, like on paper. Like, don't have anything like that falls back to the whole no gimmicks thing. Don't have anything there that's there just so that the core becomes funnier. Just have the core and make it like as bland as possible, and then try to make it feel good and control good and like time things good and stuff like that. Make that very core just as good as possible without any tricks and without having to rely on any tricks. And then after that, you can start slapping all these tricks on top of that. And then the theory is that, you know, then that will make it even better. Like, you build a solid foundation and then you expand from there. But that's, of course, a very specific way of designing a game. Like, you can't do that if you're making, say, a puzzle game, probably, because you need to have a core mechanic, you know. But for like a shooter, for action game, I think that's a really solid way of doing it, is, you know, just back to the basics. Like, make it such that when you explain it to people, they are like, oh, that sounds boring. But when they play it, they're like, oh shit, this is good. But then of course the problem is selling it. So that's what you do with the writing, and that's what you do with the music, and that's what you do with the visuals. I think we were onto something with SGW. And I mean, it has like 85 Metacritic on the PlayStation version, I think. Like, it did pretty okay, but we're not millionaires. Now, I personally never expected to be a millionaire, really, but that was an implication that was in the air at times and stuff like that. But yeah, I think it's just, you know, pick up. And like, if I was to give a, like, if the pickup is something I would say to other people, I would say just like, you know, do your thing, but also really figure out what your thing is. Like, really drill to the very core of what it is, and then do that. Don't be like, oh, our thing is, you know, like, we are, like our, I think marketing slogan is like lovable rogues making lovable games, you know. So hey, don't be like, oh, you know, we're lovable rogues, and then you do whatever you think that means at a specific scenario. Drill to the core, like, you know, with SGW, like, oh, it's gonna be fun. It's gonna be a fun side-scrolling shooter. And then just, what does that mean? Like, hold on to that, and don't dilute that in any way, and then go from there. I think is my pickup. And then I guess my other pickup would be try to lock your like, well, not lock, but try to know. I guess it ties in with the whole thing. Like, try to know what you're doing in the beginning, because a lot of the things that I'm not that happy with SGW are because we didn't plan certain things. Shit just happened. So try to account for that. Of course, always iterate, but still try to. But I think the core is just find the diamond in the middle of the thing and just keep polishing that, and then go from there.